I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Bill Groom, Production Designer on the marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Bill, I read that because of the pandemic, production was not able to return to the locations that you had used before and the sets you had used before, and you had to recreate and reconstruct them. That's astounding. Is that true?
It is true. I'm trying to think. I think it was just one of the major sets that we decided to do on stage. And it was originally a house in Forest Hills, Queens. And we had shot in the whole bottom floor of that house, having created a kitchen. And we had drawings from all of that and all of the paint samples and everything, and a lot of photographs. And so we created it on stage because we weren't going to be able to park trucks on the street in Forest Hills. Weren't sure whether we could even go back to that location at the time that we needed to make the decision. And that's what we did. And it involved creating the interiors and then also the yard outside, the sidewalk up to the house, the street in front, and a backing with the houses that exist across the street at the real location.
Yeah, I read that and thought, no, surely not, because there's no way that we could tell the difference. And so, I mean, when that was all done, I mean, surely you must have had a moment of patting yourself on the back and the team just saying, you actually accomplished that. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty successful. And I don't remember cutting any corners on it, actually. I think we worked from all of the surveys and drawings we had of the location and recreated that on stage, including a curved staircase that we were allowed to go to an outside vendor for that, and a company that specializes in curved staircases, and they helped us with that.
Wow. Now, the other really impressive work you did this season, and people always want to talk about this, obviously, is in terms of scale and authenticity, is Midge's Burlesque Club, the Walford. So instead of just building little parts of it, no, you decided to build the whole theatre, including the balcony, the backstage areas. To me, that sounds completely insane on paper, but it really pays off because those scenes in that club are so immersive and feel so real. Why did you decide to take on that undertaking in that way by just building the whole damn thing?
Well, it's funny. I've said to Amy Sherman Palladino, our showrunner, who's a showrunner with her husband, Dan Palladino, I've said to Amy that she's never seen a 360-degree angle she didn't like. And that's kind of the way she shoots everything. And I figured that out on our first season when I had dressed a street, from one corner to the other, and dressed and created what we had talked about. And then when we got there, we were spinning the camera around, and I didn't do that again. And so it's interesting that you say that it works well, because that's the way it's designed for the way we shoot. And they did collaborate with us. I mean, it's obviously an expensive set, and we were under pressure to come in at a certain number. And Amy and Dan worked with us to let us know that we weren't going to see a lobby, and we weren't going to see this, and we weren't going to see that. And so basically we created what has been seen on screen, and nothing more, really. I think we've shot pretty much every inch of that set.
Yeah, which is good, because otherwise, a lot of work is done and then we don't end up seeing it.
Yeah.
What's it like when you build something like that and then you do finally get to see it on screen, the way it's lit and shot, and the way the actors and the extras inhabit that space? What's that feeling like? Is it vindication? Are you just satisfied? Talk me through that, because I just can't imagine seeing your work utilized in that way.
Well, it's funny, I'll reference Amy again. At some point, I said to her, it may have been that set, I don't recall, but because we're now into our 5th season doing that show, so we've worked together quite a lot. Some set we did, and it may have been the Wolford, I said, this is pretty good. And she said, you sound surprised. And I said, well, we kind of go on instinct, and intuition, and you think you're doing something you're going to like, but you're not always sure. And so when you see it finished and you see it on screen, it is some kind of, it's gratifying to see that and to know that you've made the right choices. And I'm sure there are always choices that you could have made differently, but I don't dwell on that too much. So I'm happy when I see that something works. Before I started doing television, which is 10 or 12 years ago, I remember going to crew screenings or premieres of movies that I'd worked on, and occasionally sitting there this months later, looking at it and thinking, wow, how did we do that? And you do it by just taking one step in front of the other. There's an old proverb that walking makes the path, and that's kind of what you do in this business. I think you just start walking, and the show kind of in along the process. One of the things I always find exciting is that the show, whether it's a movie or a TV show or whatever, kind of reveals itself as you start to make choices, and choices work and colors work, and then you base the next choice on what worked before, and keep moving forward.
Yeah, and just for the viewer, we don't really even fully appreciate what you've done sometimes, because we see the house, we think you've gone back to Forest Hills, we see the Walford, we think, I wonder where that is that somewhere in Boston? Who knows? No, it's completely built for the show, and that is insanely good. I wonder, when you're designing for a particular period, and speaking of how you mentioned choices, are you ever able to take liberties with details where there isn't enough information or guidance from research, or where it's too expensive or too difficult to recreate? Does that happen, or are you usually really, really slavishly true to the period?
I think it has to happen. I think it's the right thing to do. We base an awful lot of our work in research, but mostly it's based on, I would say, at least for me, story and character. The research is important, but the research, I think, can never really overshadow the story and the characters. So if there are times when certain historical details might not work for the show, then you figure out what will work. And we try to be pretty true and pretty authentic, but there might be times when you have to make other choices.
Yeah. I read recently that you're referred to as the method production designer. I love that. What does that mean? What does that mean?
I'm glad you said referred to, because a couple of interviewers have said, I understand you refer to yourself as a method.
No, someone else refers to you as that.
That's absolutely right. I think they found me sitting in the set, having turned on the lights in the studio. And I will tend to, when the set gets far enough along, I'll tend to walk around, go through the doors, sit at the dining room table, sit at the sofa for a while, just sort of get to know the location in the way that the actors have to know the location. And, occasionally you'll see things you want to change a little bit, or something that might work better for an actor that when it was just on paper, you didn't really see. I just think for me, it's an important step in the process. Yeah. I remember one time years ago, I was doing a movie and I was talking to the set dressers about doing something, and they had worked with me before, and one of them said, okay, tell us what your grandmother had. It's and so I think we all as designers pull from our own experiences, not just research on characters and research on the period and all of that, but also your own emotional connection to the environments.
Yeah. Well, Bill, I think you're doing something right. You won 4 Emmys for Boardwalk Empire. You've been nominated 3 times for Maisel. You won 2 ADGs. I have a feeling we're going to see you on the Emmys red carpet. 3. I have a feeling we're going to see you on the Emmys red carpet soon. So we're going to bring you back for a group chat shortly.
Oh, thank you so much.